It's early May here in Orkney and things are starting to stir. It's only a few days since the 1st of May, when those of us seeking vitality, good fortune and beauty washed our faces in the dew on the grasses.
May morning. Tak e drap o dew, fund on fresh gorse.
The white skeletal sculptures of the winter grasses are giving way to new growth. Orkney is greening up. My friend the poet Valerie Gillies has a word for that.
Viriditas. The 12th century mystic and Benedictine abbess Hildegard of Bingen used the term viriditas, greenness, to describe the earth's greening and fecundity, but also the soul's greening. Green is good for us. Green is comforting and refreshing. The spring grass brings hope and warmth. It's a human colour. We respond to green. It has always been the colour of hope and of annual renewal, the sign of awakening life.
My name is Rebecca Marr and I'm a photographer. Over the last while, Valerie and I have been looking at the grasses, really looking. We've been undertaking research into the grasses, in the field, in the herbarium and in the library. We have discovered that grasses cover almost a third of our planet and that humans have long enjoyed a reciprocal relationship with the grasses. Grasses allowed humans to settle. As we started to think more about this relationship, we were compelled to look beyond the idea of grasses as one thing, a green sward, and to start to recognise them as individual species. A whole realm opened up for us and we fell down a rabbit hole, or maybe an Orkney vole hole. Val and I will share with you some of our collection called When the Grass Dances. This will be a walk through the grasses in the company of a poet and a photographer and the naturalist and Orkney plant recorder, John Crossley.
Grasses have lots of wonderful old names that are expressive of their appearance and the fact that people knew them and used them for hundreds, thousands of years. And they share quite a lot of characteristics in the way that they grow. Quite simple in outline, a stem, a hollow stem with little nodes and leaves going up each side. In terms of how they evolved and how they came to dominate so much of the planet, one of the things about them is they grow from the leaf base. So if a leaf is eaten, it just keeps on growing from the bottom. And this tells us that it must have adapted to do this for some reason. A lot of plants don't do that. If a leaf is snipped off, they have to grow a new one. The grass just keeps on going. And what it tells us is it adapted to being eaten off by animals.
Today, it's cattle that are the unknowing farmers, as they tread grass seed into the mud. But before them, it was the bison. Grass can survive being trodden on. It can withstand grazing. It grows from the root, not the tip. These characteristics are useful for us to think about as humans, as we look for some resilience in ourselves. We started to think about what the grasses could teach us. We had entered into a non-human relationship. The grasses turn up in Scots sayings. A green turf is a guid mither. The grass is a warm friend. I can hear the grass growing. Ilka tummock, sometimes brecht, sometimes dirk. As wise as a field o' grass. Live, horse, and ye'll get grass. We can hear the horses being encouraged to stay alive until the spring grass comes. So this is a saying from the end of winter time, when there's hardly any bite to eat in the fields.
The grasses were opening us up to a new world, awakening our senses.
Hushel. The way wind crosses a field, sounding like grass waves passing through widening circles. Hushel. The lightest skiff becomes a skill. The gentlest south becomes a swoof as a shake wind blows in gusts. Hushel. Grass is growing from the ground, moving everything within it. Life coursing through every being. Hushel.
Movement is surprisingly important in the still world of photography. It was something we wanted to show from Maram Grass, all that movement above ground, while below it's all about stability.
Maram. Maram, the grass which binds the young sand dunes, its strong roots, sometimes 20 feet long, creep through shifting sand. Its sea-green leaves, slowing down the wind, a glossy grass, protects the coastline, engineer of the ecosystem. Planted for this purpose, it creates vast areas as the dunes become fixed, and as other plants colonize, Maram gives way to them.
The name Maram itself is a combination of two words. Well, M-A-R, of course, is sea, and the ram bit, I think it's Old Norse, although it could have different origins, but seagrass is what it means. At one time, it was used for making baskets, and it had an Orkney name, bent grass or Binti grass. And when I used to live in Sandy, where there's a lot of it, because it's a sandy place, they used to maintain that there were little bugs that came out of the grass, Binti Bugs, which bit the children who played in the grass. This is a grass that stabilizes sand by pushing long rhizomes, roots out underground. And it has special adaptations to deal with the dry conditions that it gets in the summertime. Its leaves are rolled and shiny on the outside, and inside the rolled up leaf there are tiny hairs and a little microclimate to preserve the dampness it needs to survive. If we look closely, we can see that it has new leaves. This is early in the year, so a lot of it is sort of bleached, but it has new green leaves coming up through, and the flower will eventually come July time. It spreads out through the sand and can be buried half a metre underground and keep coming up, so that it's a real stabilizer of loose sand.
When you focus on a particular aspect of nature, you start to become attuned to your subject to such an extent that it is almost all you can think of, and everything about the subject holds fascination. Val and I gathered a library of grassy books, and one of our favourites is the Observer's Book of Grasses, Rushes and Sedges. This poem, a found poem, was waiting there for Val.
On time. Now is the time for the flowers of the grasses to be at their best. In May and June, some say they have their own hours for opening. Meadow grass opens between 4 and 5 a.m. Quaking grass and tussock grass about an hour later. Meadow fescue and cock's foot between 6 and 7. Foxtail, cat's tail and sweet vernal grass between 7 and 8. At 11, the dog grass opens. Around noon, the wood melick, the purple molinia, the mat grass and the sea lime grass unroll. About 2 p.m, the brome grass is nodding. The wild oat about 3, dogsweet and twitch grass at 4. Wavy hairgrass opens between 5 and 6, while foggrass opens twice, downy and pale, at 6 in the morning and 7 in the evening. All these grasses like to be on time. Each flower takes 20 minutes to open completely.
It's not yet time for the long grasses of summer, but some of the early grasses are coming into their own. Meadow Foxtail is among the first.
This is Meadow Foxtail, an early grass that grows a lot on waysides and roadsides. An early spring grass, tall as you see. Foxtail, because it has these silky little spikes like a fox's tail. Shiny, silvery, grey-blue, and condensed into a spike. This one has actually got a lot of pollen on it. Those of you who have suffered from hay fever may know that grass is wind pollinated. Pollen is taken away on the breeze to the next grass. It's very clearly got the structure of grasses, the round stem, leaves alternately placed, feature of grasses, hollow stem, and very distinct nodes.
Meadow Foxtail. Among the first grasses to flower, this comes from the old permanent pasture up the hill. You put it on the bench and call it by its name, Foxtail. Suits you, boy, even though you're not crafty. You can create new wildflower meadows using this. It dances along as you go with your heather stepping stride while your hair gleams Titian red.
In First Nation tradition, there are 4 sacred herbs: tobacco, cedar, sage, and sweetgrass. One of our early grasses is holy grass, and this is sweetgrass. Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, was a revelation. A revolution, in fact, as she revolves our Western thinking. As she says, in the Western tradition, there is a recognized hierarchy of beings, with of course the human being on top, the pinnacle of evolution, the darling of creation, and the plants at the bottom. But in native ways of knowing, human people are often referred to as the younger brothers of creation. We say that humans have the least experience with how to live, and thus the most to learn. We must look to our teachers among the other species for guidance. Their wisdom is apparent in the ways that they live. They teach us by example. They've been on the earth far longer than we have been, and have had time to figure things out.
I'm sitting in a meadow by a Loch of Stennis and the Ring of Bodgar in Orkney, and I'm surrounded by a very special grass. It's called holy grass, and it has a lovely Latin name, Hierocloe odorata. Hierocloe being holy grass, and odorata referring to its sweet scent. Holy grass because it has special properties which have been honoured by peoples in the northern parts of Europe and North America for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It smells really sweet and strong. It's been used in Europe for strewing on the floors of churches, and in North America it has sacred properties. I found this grass growing here at this site, 10 years ago. I wander about looking for plants, making lists, being a recorder of plants for Orkney, and just these shiny green leaves caught my eye, and having seen it before, I thought, that must be holy grass. And with a little looking around, I found some of these. It's a very rare grass in Britain, and not common in other places where it grows. That's North America, Iceland, Northern Europe, Asia. There's about 25 places in Britain, mostly in Scotland. 6 of these are in Orkney, and 1 in Caithness, 1 in Benbecula. So it's a very odd distribution. It spreads widely. In fact, we're sitting in hundreds of square meters of this grass here, and it could be all one plant. It spreads very rapidly through the earth on long rhizomes, creeping roots, and is not very fertile. It has a rather few seeds, and not many of them germinate when they're grown experimentally. It's a very pretty grass, as you can see, with these little drooping, quite large drooping spikelets, just with 3 or 4 seeds in each. You can see the pollen on it at the moment. It's just at the stage of producing its pollen. It has these very shiny leaves, which we're early in the year now, and they're not very long. So not very noticeable. There aren't many of these flowering spikelets, and perhaps there is more of it about in Britain than people realise. If you don't notice the grass leaves, you may not notice the panicles with the seeds on. The wonderful smell that comes off it, you can get by picking a leaf and mashing it between your fingernails. The actual chemical is called coumarin. It's kind of vanilla-ish, but it's strongest after it's been cut and laid out to dry, which is how it was used in the past.
Holy grass, a blessing. Holy grass is sweet grass on chapel floors strewn wide. Sweet grass is holy grass running streams fructified. Braids of gold and green their own scent will keep, hung above beds serene to bring a blessed sleep.
Close by the holy grass grows great woodrush.
This forest of grass-like plants here is woodrush, greater woodrush. It's rather big, green, shiny leaves and tall panicles, spreading panicles. Most rushes don't have this spreading flower inflorescence like this. They have a much smaller, condensed seed head or inflorescence. It's called a woodrush because it's mainly a woodland plant. We are sitting in Orkney, where there's no woodland, and it's growing profusely. This is partly because woodland plants are adapted to fairly low temperatures and not very bright light. And in the far north, there's a little bit of crossover between woodland environment and a more open one. The other thing is that in most of Scotland, deer eat it, and it doesn't grow like this. You don't see it in these great masses unless it's protected. Leaves either side, round stem, little tuft of hairs where the leaf sheath joins the stem. And then when you get up to the inflorescence itself, which is very well branched as you see, superficially like a grass, but not actually. Grasses have seeds which are quite different. Seeds and flowers are quite different to these. These actually have 6 little tepals. These are kind of brown and chaffy, but quite unlike grasses, which only have overlapping scales as part of their flowers and fruits.
Great woodrush. Yes, by a burn in Achnacairn woods, the gleam that lives among the leaves silvers our land, lights luminous globes, lamps that shine in the darkest weather.
I'm in a wet, cattle-grazed meadow with clumps of this tall, spiky rush, soft rush, and lots of marsh marigolds, both plants that like wet conditions and tramping in with cattle which spread the seeds. Not liked by farmers. They unpalatable, persistent and spreading, but good for other creatures such as the redshanks and skylarks that we can hear at the moment. They look like spiky leaves. It's a hollow stem with pith in it, and the leaf is really just a sheath at the bottom. The rest of it is the stem with a flower at the top called a bract. So it comes off just below the flower, which is not opened yet.
using soft rush. Rush bends to every touch, bright green smooth stems, children plait to make bracelets. Pliant, woven into bee skeps, twisted into Simmons cord, or a rush rope to fetch a pony. The saddlebags made from floss, the rushes strewn on the floor, or made into mats or chair seats. It's August for harvesting rushes, pulled rather than cut for the basket maker. Rush bows to every change. We're peeling the stems for the one white continuous pith to make into rushwick lights held in a rush nip holder burning with a soft flame. Green grow the rashes o'.
You may have heard of corn dollies, or a symbol of fortune or fertility, but have you heard of a crow's foot? The meaning of the cra or crow's foot is lost, but Neil Leask has saved the craft of constructing a crow's foot from crested dog's tail grass.
Years ago, there would have been far more of this grass growing about, because it was my grandfather that I first saw doing it. You would kind of collect a variety of grass, various lengths of ones, and you just head it down like that with your thumb, and then you just whop it round like that. You just turn round like that. Originally, there was a significance to this, and unfortunately that's been lost, because maybe it had some significance as a symbol or something, a good luck thing or a fertility symbol, or goodness knows what. That I can't help you with. That's been forgotten, I don't. But we just mind them as being a kind of interesting bit of ornament, and you just whopped it like that, and then you see eventually you would have three, and then you just join them together like what you can see there, and then you carry on. This piece starts to get thicker with all the different stalks. You keep adding that in, and then eventually you just whop it to finish it, and you trim it off at the bottom, and you have quite an attractive pretty thing called a crow's feet. And we'll try and keep that knowledge going if we can.
Crow's foot. While cows are grazing, you've all the time in the world to weave a crow's foot.
Crested dog's tail grass was an important grass in the early 19th century Orkney straw plaiting industry. So useful was this grass that there were concerns that it may not survive the over-harvesting, but it did.
Crested dog's tail grass. Crested dog's tail grass grows wiry, strong stems to plait straw for summer hats.
There are several grass names that link to the animal world. Foxtail, cat's tail, deer grass. One of my favourites to photograph is the common verge grass, cocksfoot.
It's coarse, tufted, thick-stemmed, and it has this very distinctive head on it, where all the bits of the panicle, this bit is called the panicle, grasses which have a spreading top rather than a sort of spike-like one, and it all sort of hangs to one side like that. Called cocksfoot because of a fanciful resemblance to a cock's foot. It's densely tufted, much used for grazing for cattle and sheep, because it withstands quite dry conditions, grows again quickly, succulent, persistent, easy to recognize. Broad leaves, smooth, slightly flattened stem. Most grasses' stems are round, and this one is definitely not. It's oval with sharp edges. Likewise, the leaves, instead of being flat, are folded.
Cocksfoot grass. A worn-out yard on his watch now, his ee is far awa wi' it, looking to the heathery hills. He's waiting on the bairn to coorien by shoother. She'll pu a tate o' grass for him, the cock's foot he likes fine. Thegither, in companionry, the bairn beginning to look ower the nest, the grey horse beginning to look aboot him for a last circumspecie. They forgether on the brae, wide world walking. There are several Scots words in that last poem, and I have found that Scots, or the Auld Lied, my childhood tongue, is a natural language for the grasses. In my poems I've drawn on my own living memories, recalling a life among the grasses, reanimating the words for finding a lapwing's nest on the moor, putting a hand into the outline of a mountain hare's form to discover if the lair is still warm, learning to cut grass with a sickle or to swing a scythe along with a grandparent, filling a hay net for a horse, or moving kye to fresh pasture. Sweet vernal grass, a relation of holy grass, is one of the important pasture grasses.
This is sweet vernal grass. Vernal, young, comes up in the spring, early. Sweet because it has a very distinct scent. If you crush the leaves, roll them up, you'll get a strong sweet scent. The technical name is coumarin. It's lovely to us, but it's a protection for the plant against insect attack. All its little spikelets, which contain the seeds, are directly attached to the stem of the grass. Other grasses, a lot of other grasses, they kind of spread on little arms. Really bright pea green leaves at the base, slightly duller leaves further up, round. And like all grasses, it has nodes at its joints. I don't know if that's too small to see, but there's a node there, a little bump on the stem, the joint. Like almost all grasses, it has a ligule, tiny little flap there, which in this case of this grass is a little bit hairy. Lovely colours in the head, and this one being so young doesn't have pollen, but it will have lots of pollen sticking out of it in a week's time.
Sweet vernal grass. The hill pasture is a pleasant place when sweet vernal grass is blowing, its flavour always good to taste while the summer hayfield's growing. Filled with essential oil of coumarin, flushed, its scent strongest when cut or crushed. Sometimes it seems as if the grasses hold sound from a distant time. The voices of people calling, an echo of their lives on the land. How to call in a field of long grass. For a cat, cheaty pussy, chatty puss. For a dog, iske, iske. For a rabbit, moppy, mop, mop. For a hen, chooky, tuk, tuk. For a pig, gussy, gus, gus, grumpy. For a calf, suki, suk, suk, true, true, true. For a cow, huddly, huddly hawky, pree leddy, prucci, che. For a horse, go up, gee up, how, whoa, ston, buck, buck.
In this collection, Val and I each used our own art forms to investigate the grasses. For myself, I find photography can be a communication with the natural world. I like to think the grass has its say, and the grass is being seen here as an individual with specific characteristics. Sometimes I'll be surprised by what the grass reveals of itself in the process of photographing it. It might be a texture that I hadn't noticed, a toothiness to the blade perhaps. For me, photography is how I explore my experience of the world and how I report back about it.
During the making of this collection, we worked together but at a distance, Rebecca in Orkney and me in Edinburgh. We exchanged our findings from the field, challenged each other to identify and find a particular grass, and every now and then a grass found us. Barren Brome. You turned up with me, growing by my bench in early summer, tall and handsome, broad leaves tapering to a fine point, slender stem with clusters of drooping spikelets swaying on the breeze, a weed of the wayside with loose nodding panicle flowering beside me.
For Val and I, this world of grasses is open to us now, and we can't unsee all that has been revealed to us. We will continue to be amazed by the beauty and usefulness of the grasses, and our interconnectedness with these non-human companions.
On Drowsy Brae. What are you doing here on Drowsy Brae? Letting the grass grow aneath ye, in amang this soft brome, we'll kent as sleepies. For wandered, we're dover an hour, taking a rip o' pluff grass for a pillow, or it is nid nod nodding. Oor darg maks us sair for fochten, tagled wi' a' the changes we've lain doon tyke tired. We'll streak oor length on Drowsy Brae, for that'll keep oor banes green. We'll sleep as soon as a peerie. We'll mind this when we walken. Oor folk were aye made o' grass, bairns o' the yerd and o' the universe.